It's like some people just have that certain something. They walk into a room and they just own it.
Presence, right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're talking about today, but with AI. Artificial fluency. Like, how can AI get that same kind of presence, that effortless way of using language that we humans take for granted?
It is amazing how we do, right? We just use language. We don't even think about it. But there's this whole symphony going on under the surface, this incredibly complex set of skills that make it all possible.
And it's not just about sounding smart, right?
Yeah.
It's about genuinely understanding, connecting, really getting the nuances of what's being said. And to build AI that can do that, we need to break it down. Really understand the building blocks.
And that's exactly what's so exciting about the research we're diving into today. It's all about uncovering those fundamental pieces of the fluency puzzle.
So where do we even begin? Fluency feels so fluid. Where do you even start to unpack something like that?
It all starts with attention.
Okay, attention, that makes sense. You got to pay attention to understand something.
But it's actually much deeper than that. We often think of attention like a spotlight shining on whatever's right in front of us, but it's way more dynamic.
Oh, I like where this is going. So it's not just about what you're paying attention to, it's how.
Exactly. Attention isn't passive, it's an active selection process, and it's shaped by our experiences, our biases, everything that makes us.
So it's the more you focus on something, the better you get at focusing on it. Kind of like how you get better at a sport the more you practice.
Precisely. You can actually train your attention to hone in on certain things, to filter out distractions, just like a muscle.
That reminds me of those times when I'm coding or sometimes writing and I get in that flow state. The rest of the world just disappears and I'm completely absorbed.
That's your attention honed to a razor's edge. And that's exactly what AI researchers are trying to replicate in AI systems.
So it's not just about throwing more data at an AI. It's about teaching it to actually pay attention, to prioritize what's important.
Absolutely. And that leads us to the next critical building block, relevance.
Okay, relevance. So now it's not just about seeing the information. It's about understanding what it means, right?
It's about knowing what matters at that moment. It's not just about finding all the information, but the right information at the right time.
Okay, so think about it this way. You lose your keys, right? You're not going to just start looking in every single drawer, every cupboard all at once, are you?
You'd be there all day.
Exactly. You're going to start with the most likely spots. Your brain's already making judgments about relevance without you even realizing it.
Precisely. And AI systems face this same challenge, but on a massive scale. They're drowning in data, so they need ways to cut through the noise and focus on what's actually meaningful.
But here's the thing. It's not like we have this perfect formula for relevance hardwired into our brains, right? What's relevant changes all the time, depending on the situation.
It's about constantly weighing different factors, balancing priorities, just like we do in everyday life.
So it's more about finding the right balance than it is about some perfect calculation. Like, how much information is enough? When do I need to look for more?
It's about constantly adapting, recalibrating, based on the task at hand. And that brings us to what many consider the most human element of language, and that's shared intentionality.
Ooh, shared intentionality. This is where it gets really interesting. I feel like we've talked about this before, but it's one of those things that's hard to put your finger on. What is it exactly?
At its core, shared intentionality is about our ability to work together towards common goals, to understand each other's intentions, even if they're not explicitly stated.
It's like we can communicate on this whole other level beyond just the words themselves.
Exactly. Think about it. From building skyscrapers to writing symphonies, shared intentionality underpins our greatest achievements as a species.
It's like our ability to collaborate, to be on the same page, that's a huge part of what makes us intelligent in the first place.
And that's a crucial question for AI. Can we truly replicate human-level intelligence without this element of shared intentionality?
Can you even have real communication, real understanding without it?
It's something AI researchers are grappling with right now.
Because it's not just about mimicking the words, it's about understanding the unspoken rules, the shared context.
It's about recognizing that language isn't just about transmitting information. It's about connecting, building bridges of understanding between minds.
Which leads us to another piece of the puzzle, perspective taking.
It's not enough to just know things, right? We
Yeah.
need to be able to see them from different angles to really grasp their meaning.
It's like that classic example, what is it, a pencil?
Exactly. Is it a writing tool, a weapon, a piece of art? It all depends on your perspective.
And if we want AI to truly understand us, they need to be able to grasp those different perspectives too. They can't just be stuck in this world of literal interpretations.
They need to understand the poetry of it all, the nuances, the emotions, the things that make us human, and it ties in beautifully with this idea of meta levels of fluency.
Meta levels. Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me.
Basically, it's the idea that fluency isn't just about speaking well or even writing well. It's about how well you think with language, how deeply you understand it, how flexibly you can use it.
Ooh, I like that. So it's like leveling up your language skills. You don't just learn more words, you learn how to use the words you know in more powerful ways.
Exactly. The research actually lays out a framework of 4 distinct levels. It starts with basic understanding, just knowing what the words mean. Then you move up to being able to use those words to communicate effectively.
Okay, so that's what? Basic conversation, writing a clear email?
Exactly. But that goes deeper. The third level is about using language to reason, to solve problems. And finally, at the highest level, you have this ability to think abstractly, to use language to generate new ideas, new insights.
It's like language itself becomes a tool for thinking, not just communicating.
Precisely. And this is a key area where we're seeing some really exciting progress in AI. By developing systems that can process language at these higher meta levels, we're starting to see AI that can reason, problem solve, even get creative with language.
It's like we're giving AI the tools to think more like we do, which is both amazing and, I have to admit, a little bit intimidating.
I understand that. It's a powerful technology and we need to be mindful of how we develop it. But the potential is enormous.
Absolutely. Speaking of powerful tools, I got to ask about something called selective state spaces, or SSMs. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. What's the deal with those?
It doesn't it? But it's actually a pretty intuitive concept.
Hmm.
Imagine you're reading a mystery novel, right? You're keeping track of all the clues, the suspects, the red herrings. You're building up this mental model of the story in your head as you go.
Oh, totally. And you're constantly updating that model as you get more information like, wait, if he was at the library, then he couldn't have been.
Exactly. You're making connections, revising your theories, and you're doing all of this on the fly in your head. That's essentially what selective states spaces allow AI to do. They give AI a kind of working memory, a way to keep track of what's important in a sea of information.
Okay, so it's like giving them that detective's notepad where they jot down all the key clues. So instead of just processing everything equally, AI can start to prioritize to remember the details that are actually relevant to the case, so to speak.
Exactly. And this is huge for tasks that require understanding over long stretches of text or code, things that would normally overload a system's memory.
It's like a difference between trying to remember a phone number by just repeating it over and over again versus actually writing it down so you can free up your mental space.
Yes. It's about giving AI the tools to manage information more effectively, just like we do.
Which, of course, makes you wonder, if AI can be that sophisticated, how do things still go wrong? We've all heard about these AI hallucinations. Should we be worried?
It's definitely something we need to be aware of. Hallucinations happen when an AI system generates information that seems believable but is actually incorrect.
It's like when you have a really vivid memory of something and you could swear it's true, but it turns out it never actually happened.
Exactly. And it turns out that studying why AI hallucinates can actually teach us a lot about how understanding works, both in AI and in ourselves.
So it's like their mistakes can actually be revealing.
Absolutely. One theory is that hallucinations arise from this tension between the AI's internal knowledge, what it's been trained on, and the information it's getting from the outside world, the new data it's encountering.
So it's like they're trying to fit these new pieces into their existing puzzle, even if they don't quite belong.
Exactly. It's a balancing act,
Yeah.
and sometimes they get it wrong, but there are ways to help them get better at it.
Like what? How do we teach them to tell the difference between a real memory and a false memory, so to speak?
That's where techniques like retrieval augmented generation, or R, come in.
Okay, now we're talking. Our eye sounds promising. Tell me more.
Think of R like giving an AI access to a massive library. Instead of just relying on what it's been trained on, it can now search for information in real time, pulling in additional knowledge to make sure it's on the right track.
So it's not about cramming every single piece of information into an AI's brain, but rather giving it the tools to find the information it needs when it needs it.
Exactly. It's about being resourceful. And this is proving to be a game changer for AI accuracy and reliability. But even with RAG, there's still a big question about how to best integrate this external information with the AI's existing knowledge base.
Especially since we've been talking about the importance of context, and now we're adding even more information to the mix. Isn't there a risk of just overwhelming these systems with data?
That's the million-dollar question. And it leads to a fascinating debate in the AI community. Should we focus on expanding an AI's context window, giving it more information to work with at once? Or should we focus on making it better at retrieval, teaching it to find the right information exactly when it needs it?
It's, are we giving AI a bigger brain, or are we giving it a library card and teaching it how to use it?
That's a great analogy. And both approaches have their pros and cons, right? A larger context window means the AI can hold more in mind at once, but it also takes more computing power. Could even lead to information overload.
Like trying to read a whole encyclopedia at once. You just get lost.
Exactly. On the other hand, if you rely too heavily on retrieval, you run into other problems. If the AI isn't very good at searching, it might miss crucial information or get sidetracked by irrelevant stuff.
It's that classic needle in a haystack problem, but even tougher because the haystack is like the entire internet.
And that's a key takeaway from all this research. It seems the most effective approach isn't either or, it's both.
So a bit of brain expansion and some top-notch research skills.
Got it. Precisely. Expanding the context window is important, but it's even more powerful when you combine it with effective retrieval methods. It's all about finding that balance.
And this is where it gets meta, right? Because it makes you realize that we face these same choices in our own lives. We've been talking about attention as this cognitive skill, but then there's this whole other layer of how we manage our attention in a world that's constantly trying to distract us.
We only have so much attention to give, right?
Sure.
It's a finite resource. And how we spend that attention budget, that really impacts our lives.
It's like that whole deep work thing everyone's talking about. To really focus, you have to be intentional about blocking out distraction.
And it's not just about productivity either, right?
Yeah.
It's about well-being. The things we choose to focus on, they shape our experience of the world, even our sense of who we are.
It's like that feeling of being so engrossed in something that you lose track of time. Whether it's coding or writing or even just having a really good conversation, that flow state, that's where the magic happens.
And what's interesting is this idea of an attention budget. It applies to AI as well, just in a different way. Even though AI systems don't get bored or distracted in the same way we do, they still have limitations. They can only process so much information effectively at once.
So it's not just about feeding them more and more data. It's about finding ways to help them focus, to use their resources wisely. Just like we need to be mindful of our own attention budgets in this world of endless distractions.
So it all comes back to designing systems that can manage their own resources, prioritize what's important, and know when to seek out additional information, just like we try to do in our own lives.
So where does this all lead? If mastering language is really about mastering these deeper skills, attention, relevance, shared intentionality, even this idea of an attention budget, what does that mean for the future of AI? What are we even aiming for?
It's the big question, isn't it? And I think it points to a future where AI isn't just about automation, it's about augmentation. It's not about replacing human intelligence, it's about extending it, amplifying it.
Giving ourselves a cognitive upgrade. In a way, we're not just building machines that can think, we're building machines that can help us think better.
And that is an incredibly exciting future to be a part of.
It really is. On that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into artificial fluency. We've covered a lot of ground. From the nuances of attention and relevance to the power of shared intentionality, and even that intriguing concept of an attention budget.